You know that thing your brain does in the half second before you answer a question? The little internal rehearsal, then the rewrite, then the check on the rewrite. By the time you've settled on the sentence, the conversation has quietly moved on without you. Most people would call that anxiety. The research has a kinder name for it. And if you've spent most of your life slightly behind the beat in conversations, not because you don't know what to say, but because you know too many versions of what to say, this one is for you. There's a psychological term for this pattern, and it's been mapped fairly carefully across cognitive science. It's called anticipatory verbal rehearsal, the technical name for a brain that drafts, edits, and pre-tests a sentence before the mouth is allowed to use it. Honestly, once you see what's actually happening up there, the pause before you speak starts to look a lot less like a flaw. Bear with me for a second. The mechanism is quietly extraordinary, and the everyday cost of running it is rarely talked about properly. Here's what's interesting. When you rehearse a sentence before saying it, you're not stalling. Your brain is running a small social simulation, a prediction of how the room will receive the words you're about to commit to. A 2021 paper from University College London, led by Professor Sophie Scott in the Speech Communication Lab, has spent years showing that speech production is anticipatory by design. The brain forecasts the social response to an utterance before the utterance leaves the mouth. For most people, that forecast runs fast and silent. For some of us, it runs slow and loud. That's actually the difference, not the presence of the rehearsal, the volume of it. The funny thing is, this rehearsal lives in a network most people have never heard of. Psychologists call it the default mode network, a cluster of brain regions that switches on when you're not focused on a task and starts modeling other minds, replaying past conversations and imagining future ones. It's the same network responsible for empathy, perspective-taking, and the quiet ability to read a room. In other words, the system that makes you slow to speak is the same system that makes you good at understanding people once you do. A second pattern stacks on top of that one. People who rehearse before speaking also tend to underrate how they performed afterwards. The British Psychological Society's The Psychologist has covered this gap repeatedly, the consistent finding that socially attentive people believe they fumbled a sentence that the room thought was fine. The audience moved on. You went home and replayed it for 40 minutes. That gap is the quiet engine of the pattern. The room thought you were fine. You were convinced you weren't. So next time, you rehearse a little harder. If this is starting to sound a little familiar, and you'd like more like this, there's a subscribe button somewhere down there. No pressure. Here's where it gets quietly complicated. There's a difference between thinking before you speak and looping before you speak, and the research is fairly specific about which one tips into difficulty. Work by Professor Edward Watkins at the University of Exeter on rumination-focused cognitive behavioral therapy makes a careful distinction. Useful thinking moves toward a conclusion. Looping thinking turns the same sentence over without ever reaching one. The first one helps you choose your words. The second one keeps you silent while the meeting goes on without you. And honestly, most people who overthink before speaking are doing a bit of both, the useful kind that produces precise, careful language, and the looping kind that produces a slightly clenched jaw on the way home. There's a quieter cost worth naming here. The looping kind doesn't switch off when the conversation ends. It follows you to the car. It follows you to the kettle. It picks the sentence back up at 2:30 in the morning and starts reading it again under a different light. That's not a sign your brain is failing. That's a sign it cared about the outcome more than the outcome required. Here's another layer the research has only recently named properly. According to the Highly Sensitive Person framework, developed by Dr. Elaine Aron and validated in subsequent UK studies, around 15 to 20% of people process incoming social information more deeply than the rest of the population does. You're not just hearing the question, you're hearing the tone it was asked in, the pause before it, the expression on the face of the person asking. 3 plausible interpretations of what they might actually mean. That's a lot to hold, while also being expected to reply within 2 seconds. The wonder, frankly, isn't that you take a moment to speak. The wonder is that you manage to speak at all, given how much you're doing at once. There's also a memory dimension that tends to get missed in conversations about overthinking. Office for National Statistics data on workplace well-being in 2023 found that British workers report higher rates of self-monitoring at work than most European comparators. The quiet, ongoing internal audit of how you're coming across. That audit is exhausting. It also explains fairly cleanly why a 5-minute conversation can leave you needing 20 minutes alone afterwards. You weren't being antisocial. You were running a program nobody else could see. Bear with me for a second. This is the quiet twist. The same wiring that slows you down in a conversation is the wiring that makes you the person other people remember talking to. Because when you finally do speak, the sentence has been weighed. The tone has been chosen. The version that comes out is the version that survived 4 other versions. Most people in a fast conversation say the first thing that arrives. You say something closer to the 3rd or 4th thing. And the 3rd or 4th thing, properly considered, tends to be the one that actually lands. The funny thing is, and this is the part that took the research a while to catch up to, the people in the room often remember your sentence longer than they remember the ones that came easily. Not because yours was cleverer, because yours was chosen. You can feel the difference, even if you can't always name it. A 2024 review on repetitive thinking patterns, looking for the specific Watkins or BPS published Transdiagnostic Review on RNT 2023 to 2024, suggests that the same processing style sits behind both careful speech and rumination. Same network, same depth, different context. The pattern isn't broken. It's running in a setting that doesn't always know how to use it. The trouble isn't your brain. The trouble is a world that rewards the first answer over the precise one, and the loudest sentence over the one that took a moment to build. So, you hold the sentence a little longer than other people do. You run it through the room before you let it into the room. You know the 3 ways it might land badly before you've even opened your mouth. And most days, the world calls that overthinking, and quietly suggests you might want to stop. The research points to something kinder. You're doing deep processing in a setting that prefers shallow speed. The sentence you were drafting was almost certainly fine the first time. The fact that you cared enough to check it twice is the part nobody in the room will ever know about. And quietly, that kind of care matters more than people give it credit for. If this resonated, the like button does help quite a bit. There's a membership tier in the join button if you'd like to support what we do here properly. And there's a video on why you replay conversations at 3 a.m. sitting just alongside this one. It tends to find the same kind of people.